Welcome to the live stream. We'll be starting in a minute or two.
We're all good.
We'll be starting in a minute or two. We got to do all the, hey, everybody, don't forget about us stuff.
Are we live now?
We are live. We are live now.
We're live now.
All right, let me get our video. I love this chill music, dude. This is like, makes me want to bop my head.
Oh, it's nice.
It's so chill. Distract, what up?
What
yeah,
up?
live on stage.
I can't see the chat. Oh, I can. We're live on stage. God damn
Is
it.
that a reference to the the stage channel that we accidentally went to last time? Game stream. Yeah, Bim is going to be playing competitive Overwatch, and we're all going to make fun of him.
Yes, that's what's happening. That's
Yeah.
definitely what's happening.
What's the hardest game you've ever played, Bim?
The hardest game? What you mean? What do you mean by hard? In what capacity is it hard?
It's a very hard game, like the hardest.
Right,
game.
the hardest game in terms of challenge and technical skill.
Philophobia.
Probably Philophobia. I never finished it, and that's why.
Don't you? No, that's a cop out.
I didn't finish it because of how hard it was. Hardest game. I don't know. Let me get back to you on that. What about you, Tim? Your hard game?
I didn't think that was such an existential question.
Well, I'm trying to think.
You take it very seriously.
I did. Pokemon, maybe.
What? The video game?
Yeah, like trying
That is so.
like trying to complete like 100% the game.
The game where you can never die. The game where you just end up at the Pokemon Center over and over again.
Yes. Listen, I play Elden Ring. Pokemon is harder. Pokemon's harder.
Pokemon, okay.
It's harder than Elden Ring, for sure.
Someone said Cuphead. That's a good answer.
Hi there, me and my partner want to create Souls-like combat. We're not sure how to print such a thing. And just has to learn that stuff. Buy a GameDev.tv course. Oh yeah, that's what we're here to do. Plug our courses.
Puts on sunglasses.
We got a gun to our head. No, we're good.
You can't tell if we did. Whoop whoop.
We'll get back to that question, Annie. That's a good question. We'll get back to that. We'll come back to that. We'll swivel around.
Sounds good.
EU4, hello. Hello, everybody.
All right, we're going to start the stream. We're ready?
Terraria. That's a real good one.
Hello, world. My name is Tim Roswick, and I'm with Bim Buswick. And today we're talking about what Bim can answer. Hardest game he's ever played.
Hardest game
no,
ever
not
played.
really. I guess we're not talking about that because he can't answer that.
I can't. I don't know. I don't know what the hardest game I've ever played is. I think. Are you talking?
You can try to answer it.
Listen, I'm thinking.
You have so many clarifying questions.
Are you talking PvP? We talking player versus the game?
I find all PvP games hard to play, so I don't.
Right. Dr. Puzzler, welcome in, sir.
I see some familiar faces.
There's some familiar faces.
Yeah, how's everybody doing?
Hi there. Let's start off with Elden Ring 2 in the next 20 to 25 minutes. Dude, we got a GameDev.tv course just for that.
So
get on
it. Buy a course. Watch it on 5x speed, 10x if you can do it. Download a bunch of assets, preferably if there's an Elden Ring asset, you can just download, and then you're there. Then publish on Steam with everything else, with all the other
all the
other assets.
Download all of the buy and download Elden Ring, re-upload the files. And just
Okay, listen, we're not
Don't do
promoting
that.
piracy.
I see you.
That room looks awesome,
Don't do
Tim.
that.
Thank you. It's filled with the skulls of my enemies.
It is. All his old stream partners. Rick's skull in there somewhere.
It's
Mine's next.
Okay. So if you've been to the last few streams, we've been experimenting on format. So number one, please give us feedback as we're doing this to let us know how we're doing, what you like, what you don't like. We want to make some cool streams for the peeps. Number two, we got some stuff. One of the things that we wanted to try this time around was we've got some topics. I've got some topics and Bim's got some topics, and we're going to kind of share them with each other. And you guys can tag along and see what we knew, what we didn't know, what we have opinions about, what we're upset about, what we're happy about, what we're excited for. And
Yes,
I guess we'll go there.
Start with you.
Start with me.
Start with Timmy boy.
I always start with me.
We do.
One of these days
You're
we'll
my
start
senior.
with somebody else.
We will.
Don't call me a senior.
I'm sorry.
That's not how you start a stream, Bim.
You're right.
You want to be
right.
respectful
You do.
to your elders. You don't
You
call
do.
them seniors.
You
Do you know? Okay, when I was like 12 years old, I was riding a bus in downtown LA, and I sat in the front section, which I didn't know was reserved for seniors. And this old guy sits down next to me, and then this woman comes in, and she just starts yelling at me over and over and over again. And I'm like, what's going on? And apparently, like, I wasn't a senior. At that point in time, I thought a senior was a senior in high school.
Right.
So I thought I was almost there. I was like, nobody's going to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
So I thought I was clever. And then the old man just turned to me and said, "You'll be a senior soon enough, kid." And I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah. And now you are. Look how far you've come.
I am. Many years later.
Hell yeah.
All
Tim
right.
is from LA. Tim, you from LA?
Where I'm from is a complicated topic. I've lived in, I think I counted at one time, I've lived in 25 different locations over my life. I've moved every year or two. But I did spend a lot of time in LA.
You rented a muscle car one across the country once, didn't you?
I owned
But you
the
bought
muscle
it.
car. I didn't.
You didn't rent
I
it.
didn't
Sorry,
rent-
my bad.
I don't know if you can rent muscle cars to like drive across the country with. I don't think they
I don't know.
trust you like that.
You
I mean,
can-
maybe like new ones, but like,
yeah.
yeah. I would totally rent like a 72 Chevelle, 68 Charger.
Stephen,
I'd
that's
do
from
that.
Ubisoft Copyright Matters. What is this, Tim? What have you brought to me?
I'm trying to find a post I found earlier because I wanted
Right. Because you're prepared.
to. Okay, this one. I don't want to start with Debbie Downer stuff because I know I talk. Look, a lot of what I talk about is how hard game dev is, and I
Yes.
know a lot of beginners are like excited and they're happy and they're like, yeah, we can make games, and I'm like, yeah, but it's really hard. And then sometimes it comes across like I'm saying you shouldn't do it, or it's bad or whatever. I'm trying to be realistic about it because when I came into the industry, I was really slapped in the face by how difficult it was and how demotivating it was. I thought it was like a dream career. So I just wanted to like set the expectations a little bit better, because had I been prepared for that, I think I would have fared better. So I love game dev. It's got a lot of great stuff. But this is a topic I find very interesting. Game dev as a business takes the fun out of it.
Right.
This is something I've struggled with a ton, and I've got an opinion on it. But Bim, I want to get your opinion first.
Right.
We've talked
As
about
someone
this a
who's-
little bit.
I
What
wrote
do you
game
think?
dev. I know the answer to this. I think yes.
Yeah.
I think yes. I think this is such an obvious answer, but I feel like, and generic too, but I feel like game development for me is, and maybe this is a luxury because I'm not trying to make money from it, make a living from it, but game dev is a sort of creative medium. And the second you have to take into account how will this sell, you will inevitably make compromises that affect your creative vision to sell on Steam, or to include people, or to whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, right? But you have this thing in your head that you want to make, and you're going to play on it, you're going to get feedback, you're going to change it, but then you have to think, how am I going to market this? How am I going to sell this? Now, some people don't care, and that's great. That's good for you, and that's, you know what, more power to you. You know, but I think most of us in this chat, at least, and in GameDev.tv, and you know, most game devs, I think indie game devs, are going to think, how am I going to sell my game? And therefore, I'm going to have to change things and include things that I probably wouldn't have done otherwise to bring it in. And I think that that's not fun. Personal experience is not fun.
Yeah, it's the other thing about that is you don't know if you're making the right decision most of the time. And so there's this doubt that comes from that. And then there's a doubt mixed with the quantifiable result you get at the end. And then you don't, while you're making this thing, you can't really tell if you're doing any good. And then you get to the end, and then you find out after years of work whether you did good or not.
Did you make the right compromises? Did you do this?
And then you can never tell which decision was right and which decision was wrong. You can have an opinion on it, right? Like, I think if I could go back, I would do this and this and this. Yeah. But yeah, if I'm going to make a game for fun, or I'm going to make a game for a business, those are two very different games.
Right.
Two very different games, depending 100%. On my objective.
Yes.
And some people are sort of blessed with those games potentially being similar or the same. I do think some people has that skill, right? Like some people just make, I forget what the designer's name was, but like he's made all these kind of weird games, and I love every single one of his games. And it's like his games just have this built-in viral quality. And I don't know if he does that intentionally, but he makes so many games that it seems like it's just kind of part of his developer DNA.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a dream of a lot of people to make games for a living.
Yeah.
I also think it's really hard, and it does change the type of game you're making. And I think one of the reasons why it's a dream so much is because people love making games as a hobby. Like, they love it when they're making the thing that they want to make. Mm-hmm. And what they don't realize is when they try to make it a business, it's not always about making the thing you want to make anymore. It's about making the thing other people want.
Right.
It has to take that into account.
Yeah.
And those things aren't always compatible with what you want to do. So
no, definitely not. You know, some people are saying, I mean, Kyla, is that correct? You know, I almost don't care how much money my project makes, but delegating learning each individual skill required is daunting. Yeah.
It's a lot of skills, dude.
It's a lot.
Look, if you're a musician, you got to learn like your instrument, or you got to learn vocals, right? Or songwriting or whatever. If you're a sound effects engineer, you got to learn how to make sound effects. If you're an artist, you got to learn how to draw stuff or how to make stuff 3D. If you're a programmer, you got to learn programming. If you're a game dev, you got to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you're on a team. And then if you're on a team, guess what you need? You need a lot of soft skills. You need communication skills. You need the ability to work with people. You need the ability to make compromises that you reluctantly, you're like, I really think it should be this way. And they're like, I really think it should be that way. And you got to give some things up.
So Pro KFBJJ says Scott Cawthon, dude made games for like 20 years for Five Nights at Freddy's. So Scott Cawthon's an interesting one, because I was going to bring up this game, linking back to this game dev as a business thing. I don't know if anybody here is a Five Nights at Freddy's fan or was a Five Nights at Freddy's fan. I was back in the day, FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4. That's kind of where I teetered off. But, if you've been a fan of a game for a while, you may have your own personal experience with this, of actually watching games go from an art form into a business. Five Nights at Freddy's now is a business, right? It's he sold the Scott Cawthon, he made the first few games, right? And then he sold it to, I think, Steel Wool Studios, who now, they're pumping out sequels, DLCs, books, whatever, right? They're just keeping the franchise going. And it's no longer really an art form, or really, in my opinion, they're only doing it because they know it'll make money. They know that it's going to, look, Scott Cawthon left on that release timeline. He left somewhere above the middle. I think Ultimate Custom Night was the last thing he had he sort of directed.
They've released a game every year except 2020. That's kind of impressive. That's hard to do.
They're not very good, but yes, you can tell that they did that. Nick Meyer, as you say, it's an IP now, but back in the day it wasn't really, and there were like 5 games or whatever, but they had quality to them and they had heart and spirit in them, and you watch them go from an art form into business. Really, now it's an IP business. You can watch that happen firsthand. See,
this is what I mean about the business takes the fun out of it. Is like, this is the best case in business.
Right.
This is like the best thing that can happen to you.
Yeah.
Is like get acquired and like become get royalty checks, and that's how you make the most money.
This is the best case scenario. Scott won, but who lost? Well, I think we lost. The fans lost. And you might say, well, no, because we get a new game every year. But it's like, no, that's not. Anyway, but it does. It does work for some franchises better than others, I think. Like, it reminds me of like TV shows, right? Like, there's some TV shows that really should have ended a long time ago, right? Yeah. But then there's some, like back in the day, I used to watch Stargate SG-1, and the premise of that is that they go into the portal every episode, and then there's a new world and a new conflict, right? Same thing with Star Trek. It's like a new premise every time. But because of the way that show was designed, or both those shows really, is like there's like unlimited creativity, right? Anything could happen in an episode. You could take any episode in any direction because you go through a portal and anything can happen. Right.
Which is a good premise. And so you can build a lot of cool stuff on that. Whereas some stuff is less prone to that. Angry Birds surprised me how big of an IP that became, because
100%
you just ended up with a small little mobile game, and then movies and plushies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I see so much unsolicited merchandise for all kinds of indie games that, a new indie horror game comes out, and there's like some, illegally made doll of it somewhere in some shop somewhere. People are it's crazy. But how much of this depends on expectations / defining success? It does seem like many people talk about doing game dev professionally, and the unspoken assumption is that you must make millions. That's a good point.
That's a good. Let's expand on that a little bit, because so my idea of like the indie dream that I think I've adjusted since, because it's not that I think it's unrealistic. It's that I don't think I'm willing to put in the work to get there. Which I've realized how much work it is. And it's basically the fact that like I'm going to have enough money to not worry about money while I'm making my own video games on my own schedule. Right? So complete creative control, complete schedule control, and also have games that are doing well enough to fund the next one and the next one after that. Have some security with it too, right? Like I don't want to be wondering next month about my bank account. Like maybe have a couple years of expenses so I can build the next game. Now to do that, especially as you get older, wife, kids, rent, expenses, like that stuff like adds to your overhead, and so that number goes up as you get older. Like what you kind of need to do that. And the point in my life where I'm at is like that number it's not millions, but it's up there to where if I wanted to spend a couple years of my life doing a thing, I'd probably need several $100,000, right? And which means I'd need a game that did that, and not only that, but like paid itself back, right? All the money and time I spent on it before, and extra to cover the next few years. So while it's not millions, it's still a pretty high number for me to get what I wanted out of like being a solo indie and all that stuff. So where I'm at now is I've kind of adjusted that a little bit. It's like, okay, I'm gonna work on adjacent stuff. So like I'm working with GameDev.tv. We're building some cool stuff. We're helping people learn how to make games, and that's how I make my primary income. And then on the side, I'm working on my stuff that I feel passionate about. And if that stuff does well, cool. If it doesn't, cool. But I'm working on the things I want to work on. And so it sort of funds me to do the things that I want to do. Right?
Yeah. Tim, did you find that going through that process of making a game so that you could keep making games did suck the fun out of it? You know, to flip the question back on you.
Well, I didn't. When I made Phalophobia, I really didn't make that for an audience. I made that for me because that game was kind of art, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of ignored the marketing rules, and then I wasn't really surprised that it didn't have, you know, huge success because it wasn't designed to ever really do that. It was sort of like an expression of myself, but it has put a lot of pressure on my game since then because after that, I started making Cypherpunk and then I started making Battle Barn, and those games, they did suffer from pressure now because I felt like I had to do as good or better. And then I started looking at, like, Cypherpunk especially was a game I made in public. I'd never done that before. Philophobia was mostly done before I started streaming, and then we just started streaming like level design and like cutscene design and all that stuff. So I knew what it was, and then I was just making it on stream. Cypherpunk was developed on stream, and so what the game was kept evolving depending on the audience that was watching on the stream, and I really struggled with that, to be honest. That was really difficult. So because I make decisions and I wouldn't know if they're right decisions because the decision didn't feel right to me, but people seem to like it. But like, was that enough? Was that the right people? You know, like, was that just some dude's preference, or was that like representative of an audience? And it just messed with my brain because like I couldn't tell if it was fun anymore. So it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder, especially when you don't have access to an audience that can like play test stuff for you too. Like then you definitely don't know, right? Because you don't even have any opinions at all.
Would you sell out if would you have sold out Philophobia? You know, would you have achieved that level of success?
If they were saying, here's a large amount of money, but we're going to take this game and we're going to make it into whatever we want.
Yeah. We'll continue the IP. No? You wouldn't do that. Fair enough.
Dude, okay, this is a really shitty business move, but I had a lot of opportunities after launch for partnerships, for people reach out to me to buy like large amounts of keys. I had potential like porting opportunities, and I just shut them all down.
Right. Why'd you do that?
That game was such a dark energy for me that being forced to continually interact with it was difficult. So I put it out there. I let it be, and I just wanted it to die, I guess. But I left a negative review on it too.
You left a negative review on your own?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn, man. That's a marketing stunt, though. That's PR.
No, some people thought it was fucking being edgy or whatever. I'm like, no, it's a look. I'm sorry this stuff happened in public. So I had to do this crazy emotional human, but that's just who I am, dude. Like, that meant a lot to me. That was a deep, dark. There's a lot of stuff in that game that I got out of me, which was cool. But now it's in that box, and I don't want to go mess with that box because that box is, you
can't do that. Well, let's move on to we're gonna swap the topics. We're gonna talk about what I'm bringing here today, which is, Tim. Last week, for those of you who are here, we spoke briefly about workflow, and I'm interested to know more. I'm sure chat are. Tim, what is your game dev workflow? You're a system, you build systems before you build anything else, basically. Do you recommend that? Do you think everybody should be doing that? Do you talk a lot to me about tech debt? I come to you with all these hacky solutions, like let's parent this to this for like 10 seconds for this super specific thing, and you're like, we're not doing that.
Forget about it. And
forget about it. Yeah. Let's talk workflow.
Okay.
How do you do it?
So my general workflow is, I'll start with this is a really bad light bulb. An idea. I'm really bad at this. Idea. This is a bad idea to draw. I start with an idea, and the idea sometimes is a name, sometimes it's a, let's use the actual text tool, that'd be easier. Name or concept. And then I personally need a excuse to dive in. So usually I'll do like I'll pick a weekend, or I'll try a game jam, or I'll try something else. And that leads me to the prototype. And from the prototype, I usually release a game jam version, or I'll have something working generally the way I want it to work, or I'll have a mechanic idea. And I have to get this done before I like think about the game further. Like I'm a very hands-on person. Like I have to like model the clay with my hands. You know what I mean? Like I have to like really manipulate it. So my brain can come up with cool ideas and I can see them in my head, but I have to put them into practice to see if they're anything remotely similar to what they are in my head. Right. Because that's just how I work. I don't know. I'm visual. I'm hands-on. So after the prototype, then there's usually a few directions that I can take it. I've noticed this too. So it's like, okay, so now there's a couple things I like about this. Which thing do I want to dive into and really hammer down on? Sometimes I get to this point and I'm like, you know what? It doesn't have legs. It's cool as a game jam game. It's cool as a prototype. I'll move on to the next thing. Yeah. Sometimes, and this actually happens. I don't know why that was doing that. I give up on a lot of my prototypes 80-90% of the time. Very rarely do things like this happen. So this happened with Cypherpunk a little bit, and there was a couple different options. So one was a primarily, what is going on with this whiteboard? I cannot tell you.
Chat's just talking about whiteboards being king. I agree. I have one in my bedroom across the hall. I bought a physical whiteboard and I write shit down on it. But sorry, yeah, carry on, Tim.
You're cooler than me.
Of course I
am. So one of the versions of this game was like a primarily hacking game. One of the primary versions of this game was a primary stealth game. And then the other version of this game was like a, if you guys remember Chip's Challenge from back in the day, but like a Sudoku, not a Sudoku. What are those games called? Block moving type of games. So I had a couple versions. What was that?
I'm checking. I said Minecraft. But no.
No, it's something with an S. I forget what it is.
Yeah.
And I actually said, you know what? I like hacking and stealth, so I'm gonna make that version of the game. And then, as much as I'd like to say I launched it and everything was good, I actually paused it right there after going through all of that.
Yeah, we remember those. We remember those streams that went nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Battleborn went through a similar thing. It was like a strategy game. Then it was like a XCOM meets Pokemon, and then it became. Now it's a dice builder game, which is the final version that's going to ship that we're still working on. So, yeah.
But let's dive into the your actual coding process. You know, you've got because you know one thing you were talking to me about that was very interesting. Tim and I we met up sometimes. We were working on a project. Maybe I'll reveal it one day. But he was breaking down some of the systems that he'd built for me, and you know we were talking about how rigorous and what was the word you used, Tim, about the player system that you built. It was very sturdy or something like that. You used a word to describe how it was. No, it was very. It was dynamic. Like it could be, it wouldn't break. It was like using game states and stuff like that to get it.
I don't remember what the word I used was.
But in your code, how did because for me, I would have just gone in there. I would have been like, you press D and the box moves 4 pixels to the right or whatever, and then done some hacky stuff. But you had this whole state system set up. You were like, no, we're building this properly, we're building this rigorously. What is that just your coding knowledge? Is that your years of experience, or is that something people can learn?
It depends on the So I am interested in systems. I think that's important to me. But
Yeah.
also it depends on the importance of the given system in a game. We were building a sort of 2D side scroller, and so the movement system in that was really, really important.
Right.
Any given system in a game, you're going to have a decision to make up front. You're going to have to say, is this a one-time thing, or is this something I'm going to use a ton? Infinity symbol, not 8.
8 times.
Woo, woo, woo,
Yeah.
woo, woo, woo. And the closer, if you're only going to use it one time, most of the time it's better to just do the quick hacky solution, especially in the game jam game. It's like, do the thing that makes it work, right?
Yeah.
But if this is something you're going to use a bunch, you really need to put a lot of thought into this. Now, I think the mistake a lot of game developers make is they go over here. If they like systems, they build systems.
Yeah.
Whether or not they need this or not. They build these giant complex systems that you can import databases into and then have 7 different classes for it. And like, you didn't need any of that. You made it overcomplicated from the start. But
and
a movement system,
you only used it once,
Right.
Yeah.
So a movement system is like the single thing you're going to interact with the most in a 2D side-scrolling game. It's like the single thing you're doing all the time. It's like the player verb. It's like the active central system. So when I built that, one of the things I said is we're going to do it a little bit differently. Rather than like take the control and make it do an animation, we're actually going to instead make the player state, whether they're falling or jumping or whatever, control the animation.
Yeah.
And then the control controls the state.
Yeah.
Most of the time. But the state can also be affected by the environment. So, for example, if you fall off a cliff, your state becomes falling, and you never initiated a fall, but your state becomes falling, in which case the animation still plays for falling.
Right.
Because the environment affected the state. So that's a more robust way to build a movement system, because it's reactive to the environment, basically. Like Unreal does this really, really well with their 3D characters. Like if you like fall off a rock or you hit something with your character, like the character reacts a lot in the default state. So this is a system that deserves a lot of thinking and deserves a lot of planning and a lot of building, right? Because it's like the single most important thing in your whole game. Now, if you're going to have one gun and you're going to shoot it one time, you don't need to build a whole weapon system that's compatible with any weapon and any projectile and any like explosion or any of that. You can just be like, send object from player, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like one time thing. But it's finite state machine.
Yeah.
That's what you mean. And that's the other part of this too, is that like this sort of state right here, you can only have one of those at one time. So you can only be falling or jumping or running. You can't be running and falling, right? So the latest one overrides the last one, in which case the animation is always accurate. Because you can only have one animation at a time, the state machine is a great example of how to do like, states.
Have you ever encountered problems like, I suppose because is it harder to adjust? Is it harder to, let's say you're 3 months into your project and you think, okay, I'm going to add this new thing. Is it harder to implement a new animation, or harder to implement a new, interactivity event thing, or whatever it is, because you've built this kind of box for it to interact through, or is that actually easier because of that?
Generally, it's going to be harder. The bigger and the more complex the system is, the harder it is going to be to modify it. But the intention with this thing is that you modify it in the correct way. And the way that you'd modify it, let's say you wanted to make like a jetpack, right? And we didn't have any ability to make a jetpack. You'd create a new state for flying, right? Because falling will still work, usually.
Yeah.
You may want to make it a little bit different because he falls with a jetpack or whatever. But a new state for flying, which can override all the other states, and then it will also have an animation related to that state.
Yeah.
And that way you can build that into the thing. What a lot of people don't realize is they think there's sort of two types of brains. There's a type of brain that overcomplicates everything, and then there's a type of brain that undercomplicates everything, right? So there's some people that will look at a complex system and say, no, fuck this, and build their own, just make their own little hacky solution because they don't want to comprehend all of that. It's too much information.
Yeah.
And then some people that will look at it and spend hours trying to understand it and then over-engineer the whole thing. They brought a backhoe to a shovel contest, and it's just like, what are you doing here with that thing? Right? Like it's too much. So you got to understand kind of what you tend to do, and then ask yourself if that's the right decision to do in this area. And the longer you work on a project, the more important this type of stuff is, because if you do the hacky solutions all the time, this is going to be a huge problem near the end. You're going to have so many hacky solutions in so many different directions that you're not going to be able to get anything done. And then also, if you overcomplicate everything in the beginning, you're never going to get anywhere, because you spent 2 years working on the game and basically all you have is a jump system that's perfect.
Yeah.
But it's like you're still working on that thing.
Yeah. I mean, we're those two people is basically just you and me, isn't it? Because we spent ages, Tim and I, going back and forth, and he would build state machines and he would implement these kind of systems, and I would be like, yeah, but I just want to get this done. I can just add a boolean here, I can just parent this thing to this thing and it works. And Tim was like, we don't do that. And I'm like, why? It works, and
there's a lot of impressive stuff that you've done, by the way, doing that stuff that I was like, wow, I can't believe, like, literally just that looks great, and it took me like 10 seconds. But there's also a lot of problems that especially like around the movement stuff, right? That if you do that too many times, you start to get weird glitches and bugs and problems that are really hard to track down. So we made you and I actually made a lot of mistakes on that, because like
we did,
one of the problems with me building those giant systems is I didn't fully understand the requirements of what we were building, so I built them too early. And then you got them and you're like, this is cool, but it doesn't do what I want it to do. So you hacked it.
Exactly.
And then and then I was like, why did you hack it? Yeah.
This is the thing with with workflow then, isn't it? Is at what point do you say, okay, the state machine can be built, right? How do you know when it's ready to go? When the system, is that ever a point? Do you just have to, you're shaking your head, you don't?
Go with good enough, dude. You gotta look.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, you'd write down the requirements of a thing and you'd have the acceptance criteria. And then the second the thing has the acceptance criteria, you move on and you do another thing.
Yeah.
That's usually not how it works. And especially with solo dev, you get in your own head and you want to tweak stuff, and you wake up on a Saturday and randomly you're like, I'm going to add fairy shoes to my astronaut or whatever.
Yeah.
And then that's what you want to do that day. And that's what happens. So it's never, there's no right answer to that. I think you got to do it enough to understand when it's enough. And that's the other reason why I recommend that people actually go through publishing a game, even if it's on itch, even if it's a game jam game, but definitely like publishing through Steam or something like that, because you learn a lot in that process, and you learn what was actually required and what wasn't required. Like Trello's acting weird because they got acquired and a bunch of stuff, so I can't log into it right now. But if I could show you the Trello for Philophobia, where it was like things I have to get done before launch, is like a giant list, and like I didn't get any of those things done, and I launched without it. But I was 100% sure those things had to be done for launch. It just, the way it worked out, those things didn't get done, and nobody noticed. So
Michael's saying, what if everything is considered as generic as possible by default, so it doesn't matter what the end product looks like as long as the system is ready to receive it? Well, yeah, I mean, Tim, that's, if I'm understanding that correctly, that's kind of what you wanted to build. That's kind of what this is, right? Is that you wanted to set up these systems so that it didn't really matter what I did.
Well, look how robust it is. I mean, I wish we could show the example, but like, movement should be very versatile. It depends on the type of game you're making, but like the game we were making, 2D side scroller, I wanted movement to be very, very versatile. I wanted it to handle a range of situations. I wanted to handle jetpacks and falling and getting hit and all those things. So, it should accept. So, like, for example, some people will say when you hold the D key, you go right. So push the player right and then animate the player, right? That's this kind of example right here.
Yes.
But the problem is if you get pushed right and you don't hit that control, so if something pushes you, it doesn't animate and then it looks broken.
Right.
But with this, doesn't matter. The state of getting pushed will still be a movement state. So like you'll see this sometimes where it's like a block pushes a character and the character slowly like walks backwards. That's a state machine handling the movement.
Right.
Or they get hit and they jump back or something, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So, yeah.
Because it just seems, I guess it scares me. You know, you have this machine that handles it, and then suddenly there's a very specific scenario that you're like, oh, do I need to build this in? Like, what if I'm being pushed to the right, but I don't want it to, I want it to look this specific way, and then it's like, oh, how do I, you know, so I suppose that's where just experience and knowledge comes in. You know, that's, for me, that's scary because, you know, this is your area of expertise, but I'm sure for you that's what you do.
Think of a state as one given thing at a time.
Yeah.
Right. So if there's a state that's not in the machine, like being pushed or something like that, think of it as its own thing. It might be similar to walking, but being pushed might be like, whoa, you know, versus walking. Create an animation for it and then understand when that state would be triggered and then trigger that state versus an external thing.
Right.
Like basically like when, you know, like when player movement is greater than 0 and collision with an object, right?
Right.
So like that might be a pushing state.
Yeah.
And then you might have to do some trickery to like when you run at an object really hard, make sure it doesn't automatic. I mean, it might look cool too. I've had that happen before where I built a state in and I'm like, oh, I didn't expect it to do that, but it did.
Yeah, but it did. It looked good. Michael Van Dyke saying, what are you guys talking about? Well, at the moment, we're just talking about state machines because we're talking about workflow, talking about hacky solutions to coding problems. And Tim saying, no, we don't hack our way through stuff. We
do sometimes.
We do sometimes.
All right, we're clearing this out because that topic is
we've been going.
We're moving on from our state of talking about that.
Different state. Yes, we are. But yeah, it was good. Good chat. For those of you who miss anything, by the way, obviously the full, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can just rewatch at any point post stream.
Videos on YouTube.
The videos on YouTube. Yeah. So,
Wolfie, what up? I'm basically fresh at this, and I'm really struggling to figure out what to focus on first. Major option paralysis.
Yeah.
Have you picked a game engine?
Is that the first question?
Pick a game engine and then make.
He's trolling.
Okay, I cannot.
Something wrong with your mouse.
I need one of the like writing tablets because
you do. Yeah, those are actually
make a game.
Yeah. I would focus on what calls you. That sounds really generic and cliche, but what calls to you so much so that you're thinking about it even when you're doing other things? That's the only way I've found to make.
Gotta be passionate about a thing.
Yeah, but it passionate in a way that it's
motivating.
Kind of passively passionate about it. You know, you kind of
passively passionate about that.
Yeah.
Explain what you mean by that.
What I mean by passionately is, well, look, I used to think that the desire I had in my chest and when I was working a job or I was doing a thing, I was at school or like whatever, I was constantly thinking about this project I wanted to work on, whether it was a game, a story, whatever. And I used to think, okay, well, that's just me being sidetracked. That's me being, I'm just being lazy. I should be doing schoolwork. I should be doing this, should be doing that. And there are some instances where that's true, where I should have been, focusing on get revised for the exams or whatever. Don't just work on your game all day. But then I was, school finished and, I got a job and more free time. And it's like, oh, well, actually, the thing is, there are things that call to you and you want to do them. And I think that if those things are productive and healthy, some people are called to terrible things and, don't do those. But if there's a project or a creative field, or whether it's music or sport or whatever it is, like if you just can't stop thinking about it, you just want to do, don't necessarily treat that as just like lazy procrastination, like, oh, he's just playing golf all day, like maybe that's a problem if it's too much, you know what I'm saying. But I found that the things I was passively passionate about when I was just lying in bed or going on a walk or whatever, it would just come to my mind, like I just had to do it. So that's how I made those decisions. It's like, okay, what do I have to be doing right now? I don't know if that made any sense to anybody, but I just saw somebody insulting Construct.
We're gonna ban Wolfie. We're gonna ban Wolfie.
Now hang on a second.
Wolfie,
Goodbye, Wolfie
gets banned. We don't talk
smack about Construct.
Rule number 1 of Tim streams: you don't talk shit about Construct. You don't do it.
Yeah.
Banned. Anyway, you made a really good point, Bim. What do you do when you have too many of those passive passions?
So you do nothing and you sit on your phone.
Just sit there and you just like
you go on Instagram, YouTube Shorts until you get too tired and you go to sleep and you do it again. I don't know, Tim. That's been my biggest issue. Is I have 2 things that I really need to do, and what I'll end up doing is I'll just end up ignoring one and just burning myself out on the other one, and then I swap, and it's not healthy. So I don't know how to.
What are those things, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, one of them is our side-scrolling platform that I will be revealing soon enough, I'm sure, when I have the confidence to. But and the other one is this book project I've been working on for a few years, which we've been talking about for donkey's years. But these 2 very personal projects to me that I just need to get finished. I just think about them all the time, but it just
you feel like they call to you, like there's something you have to do.
Yeah.
Phasmophobia felt like that for me.
It
didn't feel like I chose to make that game. It felt like that was a game I had to make.
100%. And it sounds, people listening, I know how like cheesy and like artsy that sounds, but if you feel it, you know what we're talking about. It's not as cheesy as it sounds. It's real. It's a real feeling. It really does.
I've had it.
You've experienced it. But yeah, Tim. So I don't know. What do you do when you've got two or more things? When did you ever experience that during Phasmophobia? You were like, well, I need to do Phasmophobia, but we're cool to do something else.
Yeah. Well, during Phasmophobia, I realized that most of my life I'd spent not finishing things because of that.
Yeah.
So
right.
I always had interest in so many things that I just never finished a thing. And so that became a personal journey to finish a thing. Ironically, I finished like 20 some games during Phasmophobia because I was so distracted. But like game jams and like events and like random stream things we'd make. So I finished a bunch of little projects, but that was the first big project I completed.
Did finishing a bunch of little projects help you to finish Phasmophobia, or would you say you would have finished it anyway?
I needed them because there was Phasmophobia took me 4 years, but there was a gap of like 6 months sometimes where I didn't work on the game at all. Right, so it wasn't like 4 years of like every day working on it. It was like 4 years of time.
Yes,
and sometimes those months would be spent doing other projects, but I'd come back to it. It really, really helped because I call it ADHD or whatever the hell you want, but like, your brain needs stimulation sometimes. At least mine did, and so I needed to work on other things. It also gave me the confidence that I needed. Like the slow finishing bigger and bigger projects, doing more and more ambitious things. By the time I actually finished Phasmophobia, it was like it didn't seem like that big of a deal. Which is cool because when I started, it was like so massively large, I couldn't comprehend it. Right?
Yeah.
So it just
was that partly overscope. I remember you said you planned out like 50 levels for like 5 zones or something like that, right? And then you had to cut it down to 4 zones or with like 25 levels or something like that.
No, that was just my obsession with quality. I think.
Okay.
Right. I cut. There was like 320 some levels I built, but only 100 of them shipped.
Wow.
Because I cut like
release the
200 plus levels.
Release them. Get them out. Let me play them.
No, because they're not good enough. They're not like.
Yeah, I know.
They didn't flow right, and sometimes there wasn't a spot for them. Like, Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was people would get confused. People would die so much. There's actually one level because I have analytics in the game, and so I can tell every time somebody dies in a level. On the Steam version, which is cool. But there's one level that everybody gets stuck on that is just way too hard for where it's at. It's in section 2, and it's got, for the average person, a level might have a dozen or two deaths. That one has hundreds, and it's just this giant spike in deaths in one level. And that's an example of a level I should have cut or I should have changed, because there was a lot of stuff like that was very spiky when it shouldn't have been. And it's actually the drop-off point for a lot of people in the game. So they quit the game there, which I don't like. That makes me feel bad. But
you want to re-release it with that level cut?
No, I don't want to do that thing. Somebody brought up Godot earlier, and one of the things I wanted to talk about before we end, because I know we've been going for an hour already, almost. I found this really interesting. The Marvel Snap developer, Second Dinner, they're working on a Godot game.
All you Godot haters out there.
So, Marvel Snap is a huge game. It's a huge franchise, and this is a very well-funded company. And they have a partnership with W4, and they're working on a Godot game. I think this is fascinating, dude, because this is a very big developer making big games, and they're working on Godot. I think this is a turning point. I think last year with the Unity event, was it last year? I think it was last year. Yeah. With all the Unity stuff, I think
in the chat. Yeah.
I think that was a big turning point. A lot of people switched to Godot, but I think Godot's gotten a lot more serious than last year.
Right.
Which I'm super excited about, because if this is like a cross-platform, I don't know what they're working on. I don't know if it's going to be a Marvel game or what, or it's their own IP. But if this is a like cross-platform like game that does well, a lot of beginners anyway, they're always asking like, what successful games has Godot made? Yeah. Right? Like, should I use Godot? Because like you can look at Unity, you can look at Unreal, and you can see all the successful games, but then they get a little scared because they're like, Godot doesn't have a huge catalog of games.
You think that this is exciting because a big brand, big names are pushing it out there?
Yeah. But it's also like the other problem with Godot was porting. So when you work with Nintendo for Switch, or you work with PlayStation or Sony for PlayStation, you need a dev kit to develop on their system. And with the SDK and the dev kit, you need to sign non-disclosure agreements. And because Godot is open source software, Godot cannot release those SDKs. You as a developer have to go and sign those individual agreements and then figure out the SDK and implement it yourself in Godot.
Right.
But they created a company called W4 Games, which is a for-profit company, and it's a porting company, and it's by the creators of Godot. And they basically have signed some of those agreements, and they can help you bring your game to multiple platforms through this company. It's like a loophole kind of deal.
Yeah.
But they're also making money out of it too, because it's been an open source project for a long time. So the Marvel Snap developer is working with the company, W4 Games, to port and build out the games, which means that this Godot game is very likely going to be on different consoles, which is what Godot has needed for a long time. They've needed that multi-console support because people are hesitant to use Godot if it can't expand. Like, let's say your game does really well on Steam. One of the first things you're going to want to do is like bring it to Switch or bring it to another platform, because that's the like fastest, easiest way to make more money. Just reach a different audience with the same game, right? So before W4, it's been very difficult to do that. It's not impossible, but
that's wow. So I mean,
it's big news.
I think it is big news. I mean, is it big news for? Is it just big news for Godot diehards? Could they have just used a different engine? Am I going to get slaughtered for saying that?
That sounds very aggressive.
It does. It does sound
Godot diehards.
I'm just thinking. It's good if you use Godot, but you know, could have used a different.
Well, Godot. Here's the thing. I think Godot has finally gotten the love that I think it's deserved over the last year since the Unity thing, because it's been a really good engine for a long time. It just hasn't had the the multi-platform support and like the publishing support that some of these other engines have, because they're businesses, they're public companies, they're all this stuff. So now that it has that, it's kind of like, why haven't they had more success? And we're starting to see that now, which
More
is cool.
Success. Yes.
Yeah. And so Godot is quickly becoming like the blender of game engines.
Oh, game engines, really? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So not industry standard, but loved by everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And known and so widely used that some companies actually are like, okay,
are actually starting to use it. Yeah. Well, that's that is exciting. So any Godot users out there, pay attention.
Because it's really cool.
This is really cool. I love programming. Honestly, if you plan to get serious with game dev, you'll likely need to learn multiple engines. Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, some companies even have specific engines for their own games, right? I think like
they have custom stuff.
Custom stuff. Yeah, that's the AAA stuff. I don't know.
I do think there's a big difference if you want to work for a game company versus if you want to make games on your own. I do think those are two different skill sets. Rick has a great course, by the way, on how to get a job in the game industry. If you guys are looking on GameDev.tv,
which
it walks you through. Yeah, it's not just like apply for a company. It's like build a portfolio, add them on LinkedIn, like do this cool tactic to like network with people, get in this way. It's got a lot of like tactics.
Do we have a
link for that? Get your link.
Yeah, bring that up.
Yeah, it's a pretty legit course. Which is cool. It's a little older. What did I just search courses?
Animal Well was made with a custom engine.
It's on sale for $12. As you can tell, it's a little bit older.
It's a little outdated.
It's a little, but a lot of the stuff he teaches in this is like general stuff, not so much
like
structuring cover letters and.
God, he looks so young.
He's a little baby Rick.
I'm excited to watch the add-ons for Godot grow. Already got a lot of really sweet tools out there already. Yeah, well, if it's going to be like the Blender for game engines, like Tim said, I mean, Blender's you can do anything. You know,
add-ons for Godot grow. What is that a thing? Godot?
No. Add-ons for they're excited to watch the add-ons.
Oh, right. Grow. I was like, is that a like marketplace that
Godot grow? Sounds cool though.
It does. It sounded like a thing. Yeah. I was like.
Hyperfix Ghost, I've really enjoyed your courses so much. Tim, big round of applause, but also to all of the people all of our instructors, obviously. In fact, Tim doesn't get any credit for that. I don't know why I clapped him, but all of the instructors. Yeah,
dude, I'm not. I taught a construct course, but Wolfie's not allowed to take it.
That's true.
We work with a lot of very talented instructors that are very good at what they do, and I'm really. One of the reasons why I love this company is because we have very high quality stuff at very affordable prices, which is cool. I think that's a good mission. Game dev is hard enough, let alone having to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on all kinds of stuff and get lost in what to do.
Game engines, tools, certain jobs, see game engines as tools, and certain jobs are easier with certain tools. Definitely true. Yeah.
They're very complex tools, though. It's not just like a drill. It's like
it's true. But I moved from GameMaker to Construct, and maybe it's just my knowledge of Construct though. But Construct, listen to Construct haters, Wolfie. I'm only joking. But my workflow changed. It just was easier. It was more intuitive. I felt.
I moved Bim to Construct from Unity.
He did.
He had a Unity game, and I was like, dude, what if I develop this whole game in Construct for you and then give you the code? And he was like, okay. And then I moved him there. So that's what.
Hey. That makes it sound like I coded it all myself 100%, which is why I was convinced to move, which I didn't. Tim did it for me. But Construct, I'm very eternally grateful for that, because Construct is a fantastic engine. So I would recommend.
It's really great for 2D games. And like we're talking about tools for the right job, it's really great for simple 2D games because it's got all the built-in tools for that.
Yeah. Everything is really straightforward. So it's really, really nice. Your UE C++ course has basically solved the part of the Unreal Engine that I missed. That's good, man. That's glad to hear it. Hell yeah.
Hold on.
I think we got a promo.
I think you're talking about the old C++ course, but there's a secret that I can't show. Maybe I can show. You guys want a secret?
Let's do it.
You guys want in on the secret? There may or may not be a C++ action adventure game course coming out very shortly. Maybe I don't know.
You're not allowed to say that.
It's if you're a lifetime member, you maybe already have access to it.
Yes.
You maybe got access to it today. Maybe. Theoretically.
Oh, yes.
Allegedly.
Yes.
But yeah, I think Hyperfix was talking about the old one.
Oh, the old one.
Which is still relevant, but it's not an action adventure one.
Yeah, well, keep your wits about you.
What'd you call me?
Open. Me?
Just kidding.
What did I say? Me? Oh, you talking?
You said never mind.
Oh. Okay.
No. Lifetime members do know. They be knowing all the stuff. Godot asset library is very limited. Yeah, I'm always kind of depressed when I look through there. Because I always get excited because it like opens up with the Godot editor and I'm like, ooh, let me look for like free cool stuff. And then it's kind of just like,
Yeah.
But I think there'll be some cool stuff coming up soon.
Tim's going to
especially
personally.
maybe there's some assets from GameDev.tv coming up.
GameDev.tv is
that might work with Godot.
Yes.
Natively. Like maybe. Again, allegedly, who knows?
Might be a trailer for that coming out soon. I don't know.
Maybe.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. Here's the instructors. Wasn't there a 3D tool thing interesting in Construct a little while ago? There is a 3D tool thing in Construct. I have not used it personally, but
it's okay. 3D in Construct is weird because it's like it's 2D, but you can make. Here, I'll show you guys. It's not real 3D. Let me see if I can find some screenshots of it. So you can make like Doom type of stuff, but mostly you can make boxes. That's pretty much all you can make.
Yeah. It's like old school 3D.
Yeah, so like you can make cubes and you can make sort of like what do you call these, like triangles, like half cubes. There's a series of shapes you can make, and then you can put like flat sprites on a 3D world, which is kind of a cool look. Mm-hmm. But it's not like you can't like load in a Blender model and do that. But it is still pretty cool. It's got a certain aesthetic to it.
So, but yeah, guys, we've been going an hour. That's our time up, I think.
Bim's kicking me out.
I am. Tim's actually next door.
Yeah.
Out my house. Yeah.
Thank you guys for hanging. Before we leave, I would love to know any feedback you guys have for us. What part of this stream did you love? What part did you hate? Who do you like better? That kind of stuff. If you guys want to give us some quick feedback.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming. I appreciate you guys hanging out.
Yeah.
I have fun doing these, and we'll schedule same time, same day next week. We'll schedule some coming up.
It's been great to see some familiar faces. Liaison, I did see you in there. I don't know if you're still here. I didn't say hello at the time, but I did see you. Hope you're still here. Dr. Puzzler, Ivory Lion. It's been great to see some familiar faces from GameDev.tv and GameDev Underground who popped in here. So welcome in.
I appreciate you guys.
Thanks for hanging.
So,
same time next week.
Have good night.
Good night,
bye,
everybody.
I enjoyed talking smack to Tim. Well, if you could not talk about Construct, rule number 1 of game dev, you don't talk about Construct. That's
someone. Yeah, we don't do that. We don't do that.
Ivory, nice hanging.
Nice hanging.
Richard,
nice hanging. Ali O'Toole, thanks for hanging. We appreciate you.
Jack David. Nobody's giving us feedback.
Nobody's giving us feedback. People just saying,
I was serious when I asked for feedback. I was like,
Tim wants feedback all the time.
I want actual feedback.
He wants to know what his new stream background should be.
Maybe maybe that means we did a good job, Bim.
I think it did. I think people
performed like monkeys. We did the thing.
We did. All right, peeps.